So can you give us the roll call, Jerry?
Sure. DeKreiger?
Here.
Windover?
Here.
Snyder, absent. Brown?
Here.
King, absent. Dubravik, absent. Taylor?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the agenda for tonight?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Genie just appeared.
Regarding the minutes, the May 13th meeting minutes, we did not have a June meeting, and so we need to review the May 13th meeting minutes and approve or amend as needed. Does anybody have a chance to look them over?
I would make a motion to approve them as written.
Support?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? They're very detailed, Jerry, thanks.
Probably more so than they need to be.
No, it's fine, there's no questions. I thought it was great. Okay, we don't have any public hearings tonight, so we're gonna move on to new business. Jerry would like to talk to us about our input on the downtown facade improvement program design guidelines, which you received in the mail. So, Jerry,
Okay.
go ahead.
Thank you. Yes. You may or may not be aware, hopefully you are after having, if you've had an opportunity to look at this, but the Downtown Development Authority has a low-interest loan program, and they do this in concert with there's 3 or 4 local banks. And if you have, for example, a building in the downtown, you want to make some facade improvements, exterior improvements to that building, to the front, let's say you're on Mitchell Street, or to the back, you can apply for, and it's fairly easy to qualify for a low-interest facade loan. And essentially, up to a certain amount of money, the city will loan half at no interest, and then the bank will loan the other half at a lower interest than normal. Those are blended, so you get a fairly good interest package. And you can use those monies, again, to make those facade improvements. The most recent loan was made to the Landing Dance Academy. They bought the Steve Fowler building, and they're effectively been making the improvements. I talked to Nan, I don't know, it's been a couple of weeks ago. There's a committee that reviews the application. It's not the full DDA, although the DDA approves it. There is a committee that reviews the application and then makes a recommendation to the DDA. And that committee is the one that's responsible for essentially reviewing what's being proposed and does it or does it not comply. And generally compliance is more along the lines of, have you filled out the applications properly, are you creditworthy, and so forth. But it's the actual guidelines in terms of what would we like to see happen design-wise in the downtown with your building, pretty limited. Doesn't provide a lot of, the guidelines don't provide much in the way of suggestions, recommendations, guidelines, or requirements concerning, for example, you shall maintain an historic theme, or you shall maintain this or that, and what does that mean? And the downtown has changed obviously over time, but it still does have a certain historic character to it. Some buildings more than others. And I just was thinking that if there's interest on the part of you folks, it's totally up to you. If you wanted to essentially review the facade loan program package and possibly come up with some suggestions or recommendations for downtown guidelines. Now, obviously, your recommendations would be historic in nature, I'm assuming. I don't think you're going to do contemporary. It's not what this committee is all about. And you may say, no, we prefer not to get involved, so that's totally up to you, but that's really where it's at. Is, does the committee, do you feel we, need some historic design guidelines in the downtown? And if so, perhaps you might be willing to come up with some ideas, thoughts, suggestions as to what those guidelines, should entail. That's really where it's at.
But they wouldn't be mandatory because we really don't have jurisdiction.
No, they wouldn't be in other words, you wouldn't get to review.
Right,
and
it would just
approve.
be,
It would be this other committee, but right now, it's like,
it'd be suggestions.
yes, right.
Only in one building would we be involved.
Right, that's the MDOT.
Right, but, yeah, for the majority of buildings, the DDA is outside your territory, and, so you wouldn't have any say like you do with work applications on exterior improvements in the district.
So you're basically just asking if we have any recommendations.
The
along that line that
recommendations
we
is
might
really
wanna
what,
recommend to the DDA.
right, and we do, even though we haven't, we haven't done, I think I put it in your package, we haven't done a ton of these, given out a ton of loans, so to speak. I put some of the ones we've done in there, Lakeside Title, the Manpower Building, the Shea Station, Brinks Custom Framing, the Landing Dance Academy, Quadrant Northwest Appraisal, Baird, Cotter and Bishop, the Comfort Center. Those, for example, all participated in this program. Right now, we have 2 other individuals who own buildings in the downtown who are inquiring. And so that I probably won't indicate who they are right now, but they're inquiring. My thoughts are it's unlikely at this time they'll move ahead, but the fact that they're inquiring is a good sign. And they have both asked, well, are there any design guidelines that we should be following, that we should tell our architect, or that our architect should be contacting you about? And other than what I have in the package, which is basically limited, no. I can make suggestions, don't get me wrong, but it's pretty vague right now. The guidelines do talk about maintaining an historic design theme, but that can mean a lot of things. And again, I'm not suggesting that you get into, very specifically, you shall. But are there some basic thoughts, particularly when we're dealing with the exterior of buildings? Maybe it's materials, maybe it's signs, maybe it's window treatment,
Well, I have a suggestion. When I've seen these in other communities, and they're not necessarily local historic districts downtown, or even national register districts, and I've seen some design guidelines followed for facade programs like this. They typically, rather than try to pick and choose certain historic themes or bits and pieces of things that you could recommend or suggest, they'll just incorporate the Secretary of Interior standards and just say, we encourage property owners that have historic buildings to follow the Secretary of Interior standards, which of course are very general.
right.
And I have a copy of them here for everybody again, but you all are pretty well familiar with them at this point. But as you know, they're just the 10 very broad standards that our design guidelines are based on. And that might be a place to start. That might be most appropriate.
It's up to you folks.
And just encourage them to.
And the design guideline committee is very open to suggestions, so.
Were
The
you
design
thinking, Jerry,
guideline
that
committee
would,
is me.
yeah, would you think we would attend one of their meetings, or how did you envision that we could get involved?
Well, here's what'll happen. If let's say, for example, we were to use the basic Secretary of Interior standards, we would recommend that to the Downtown Development Authority, explain why. And essentially, the DDA, if they agreed, would then simply vote and amend the facade loan program guidelines, and it would be implemented accordingly. Does that simple. They just never have been approached
Mhm.
about being a little more comprehensive, you might say, you know, I think first and foremost, probably they're most interested in just let's fix up buildings, you know, this is what this is all about. But again, I've a number of these folks that have taken advantage of the program have asked, you know, well, do we have to follow any specific guidelines, or what, you know, even what would you like us to follow? And in some cases, you take like the Shea, you know, they maintained, I think, a fairly good historic theme, and, but, you know, some of the other projects I mentioned, they're much, you know, still nice, but more contemporary.
I think it would at least get them aware of what the Secretary of Interior standards are. And if we recommended, you know, that we would encourage them to follow them when they're doing their renovations and rehabilitations, I think it would, certainly couldn't hurt.
I mean, that's fine, you know, and, you know, I'm familiar with the 10, so,
Yeah.
you know, I don't have a problem going to the DDA and saying, let's, you know, I've talked with the Historic District Commission and explain the issue that I'm dealing with here, and, you know, we'd, you know, like you to consider amending the current guidelines to, you know, to integrate or to include these.
I don't know how we could lose on that, I mean,
You really can't.
no,
They can always
they
say
can
yes
take it
or
or
no.
leave it.
Right.
Right. I mean, again, it's, if they implement it, then it is enforceable, right? Us
It is.
saying,
It's
doesn't mean
enforceable from the
anything.
standpoint that they then have the opportunity to say no to a specific design. I mean, I'm not saying somebody's gonna do this, but, you know, somebody wanted to, you know, aluminum siding, vinyl siding on the front or something.
Mhm.
They could say, well, you know, you can do it, as long as the building code will allow it, but you're not gonna be able to access this program. That's the carrot. And if you wanna access the program, you know, these are the guidelines we'd like, you know, even with these guidelines, your range of materials, for example, is
Right.
still, you know,
Quite broad.
but we want you to tell your architect, if they use an architect, or your contractor. In many cases, they have an architect, you know, we want you to tell your architect that, make sure he or she, you know, is aware that, you know, these are the guidelines that we're gonna be using. That's simple.
I think it makes sense when they are asking for dollars like that there are some guidelines.
Right.
To simply say, we're gonna loan you money and just are gonna rely on your own sense of good taste, really. It's
And the
proven not to be
lending
successful in the
institutions,
past.
they essentially have, they essentially have no say, you know, in the design, so to speak. They trust us. If you as a city have approved your half of the loan, so to speak, or your side of it, then as long as this person is creditworthy, you know, then we'll approve our side.
Yeah, they're gonna look at the business side of it to make sure that the business works, right?
Well, the other thing it'll help with is if somebody's getting ready to remove something significant, you know, it'll give them pause to do that.
Right.
If they remove the brackets at the top of the building, or, you know, something that's not going to be replaceable,
Mhm.
other than something fake. It'll give them pause before they'll do something like that, which is gonna permanently alter and change the building. So I think it would be providing a sense, some type of protection.
Yeah, I guess from the standpoint of the HDC, again, you wouldn't have any say as
Right.
a commission, but yet you'd have some knowledge in knowing that you've helped maybe steer the downtown a little bit in terms of its appearance.
Raises it in.
And, you know, things can
That's a good
take
idea.
years, I realize, but, you know, it's something here, something there, and eventually, hopefully, incrementally, and, you know, you're working towards a design theme, if you wanna call it that you feel is, you know, is proper for the downtown.
I think, I'm wondering if it would be appropriate for us to go ahead and vote on it tonight, and just say that we've had a discussion about it, if we,
Vote on what?
making a recommendation to the DDA that they, incorporate the Secretary of Interior standards for
An
rehabilitation.
advisory
Yeah, as
on
recommended.
our part.
Correct, it's just a recommendation.
Encouragement.
It's a recommendation, and it's up to them to decide if they wanna do it or not,
Right,
and how
right.
they wanna enforce it.
Right.
And
I mean,
think
I
that would
could
be
have,
appropriate.
I could have personally just gone to them,
Yeah,
Mhm.
but you're
Mhm.
the Historic District Commission, and I just think it would be nice.
Sure.
You know, if it came through this body.
yeah,
I'd make a motion that we as a board formally, encourage the DDA to implement the Secretary of Interior standards of rehabilitation as their guidelines for, loans under their facade improvement program.
is there a second?
I'll second.
Questions,
Question.
discussion?
Some buildings in the downtown might be quite newer, but still be coming in for a facade. Do these guidelines cover all of that, do you think?
I think in a lot of ways they do. These guidelines are still, I will say loose. I mean, they give some direction, but they don't give specifics for the most part. And it talks about preserving historic character, preserving historic elements. If those do not exist, obviously things don't apply.
Not to presume anything, do they have any other standards that are in place that they use now?
Basically, it's just a broad standard that talks about working towards maintaining the historic character of the downtown. That's it.
Which is kind of what this says in a little bit more specific terms, I think. I mean, there are some buildings downtown that certainly don't meet historic
Mhm.
nature or intent.
And then it wouldn't apply.
I'm just wondering whether the way you worded that, I mean, I don't wanna be presuming that everything should be made to look 150 years old.
Right,
It's to
Well,
this.
Actually, yeah, and one
Which
of the
is-
standards does say that you're not supposed
New
to
additions.
make it fake. So you're not gonna try to make something look historic. So that's also one of the standards in here. It is,
Mhm.
for example,
Well, item 10 maybe.
yes, and the last part of 9. New additions and adjacent or related new construction would be undertaken in such a manner that if removed,
New work for different.
I think it's number 3. Each property to recognize changes that create a false sense of
Sense of
historic development,
historic
such as adding
developments.
conventional features or elements, will not be undertaken.
and
So-
also the last part of 9, the new work shall be differentiated from the old, will be compatible with historic materials, blah, 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 to protect the integrity of the property. So if you're adding something, you have to make sure that it's
Okay.
differentiated. So there's a couple places in there that states that you, number one, if you're gonna do it, it needs to be compatible with the old, if you're, something new you're doing. And you're right, number 3 is the not making it fake, so. Anyway, so is anything else? Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, and this is just, we're voting to make a recommendation, and they
Right.
can do with it as they please.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Jerry, I think that was a great idea, thank you for bringing it to us.
Mhm.
Yeah, it, you know, lends credibility to this organization, and I think it's important, you know, to the city in the long term.
Sure.
Because there will be more loans given out, I can almost assure you, as time goes on, so I think it's beneficial.
Okay, next on our agenda, we're gonna talk about the historic district ordinance review. You're gonna sort of tell us, we had a problem with our,
Yeah, we were gonna video conference with the attorney, it's not his fault tonight, by the way, but just equipment wise, I don't know, I'm not a techie person, so just some glitches, but we are gonna have finally, we will have the attorney here next month, so he's gonna be here, and he's got another reason to be here as well, so it's gonna work out pretty well. And in the meantime, we have sent him, all the information that you put together for Brian and so forth regarding your questions with possible changes and so forth, so he'll be ready to address any questions you might have.
I guess I have a little bit of a concern just because this has been going on for so long, you know, we really need to put it to bed. I mean, this started back in December, and I understand things happen and all that, but we really need to kind of put this to bed, I think. I just don't know if maybe we wanna, the idea of having the attorney here was just to answer any questions we might have.
Just answer questions, basically, right?
So I guess my question to the HDC is, do we have questions at this point, or where are we? Because, and do we need the attorney's input? So if you feel we still do, then we can, but I would like to make a couple comments about where we are right now. We had, Brian had revised it now, and had created a new edited edition, and we
Right.
all have a copy of that.
That's also been sent to the attorney.
Okay, well, that was my question. Did
Yes.
that-
Oh,
okay.
yes.
So the
Everything
attorney
Brian
has,
put together has been sent to the attorney.
okay,
The way Brian had posed it was you basically had questions. And,
yeah,
but I mean, if what you're looking for is to have the attorney review it and comment, I can get that right away.
I'm just wondering if we might not wanna go ahead and do that.
Yeah, I'd be happy
I
to.
mean, that wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, I can have him comment, and he'll come back in writing.
Can we add some questions to that?
Yeah, absolutely, and I also wanna make sure that you include the edits that I sent to everybody on May 13th. This
Yeah,
was
that,
only-
yeah, I can visualize it, that went as well.
Yeah, I got extra copies of it. I sent this out to everybody after reviewing it, cause we were gonna go over this, and I did send a copy to everyone. Actually, I don't want that copy, I couldn't get my notes on it when I sent it out, but these are the revisions that I made based on reviewing what Brian had done, the
Right.
edited version. There's two things that I wanted to point out that I still had concerns about that were not changed. And that was number one, the section 12-180, the violation payment of costs. They still did not include the phrase that states that a person, individual, partnership, firm, corporation, organization, institution, or agency of government that violates this act is responsible for a municipal civil infraction and may not be fined more than $5,000. That last phrase, and may not be fined more than $5,000, was not included. And that is in Public Act 169, which is the act that we follow. And we adopted to be a local historic district. And we discussed this way back when, and I think it should be included in our ordinance.
Well,
And it's also in the model ordinance that we're
okay,
looking at.
and I think that my question to the attorneys would be a model ordinance as such, for obvious reasons. It may, however, have local tinkerings, and one of those, in my mind, would be a $5,000 fine, which I think is inappropriate.
That they cannot be fined, but not more than $5,000?
I think that's too high.
Well, that's what Public Act 169 states.
I'm aware of that.
So we're already following that, is my statement.
I'm
So,
aware of that.
I mean, we already have to follow
We
that.
see this section as it currently states. I would like to see that reduced, particularly when we have part two, which is the remediation part of that. And in my mind, is the more severe penalty, an appropriate penalty. In other words, if someone were to do something,
They're required to fix it.
they're required to fix it. That, I think, is more in character for what we're trying to do.
Well, we're not eliminating that.
Well,
We're just saying that they can't be fined more than $5,000. We're not saying that they can't also,
Well, that was my
pay for-
question, because the way it is presented to us with the new section 12-180, it has the restoration replication is there. Although it does not go on with the definition, person, individual, partnership, firm, corporation, organization, which I think we have discussed in other relations here, and we should be sure to include that definition.
yeah.
So that it covers, it covers every entity.
Just to make sure I'm understanding, I'm looking at the model ordinance right now, and under penalties for violations, under that section 20, it does state the first part of not be fined more than $5,000. The other part of that does state that a person, individual, partner, all that stuff, violates this act may be ordered by the court to pay the cost to restore,
Right,
okay, or replicate,
right.
okay.
But the way this is in red here, my question was, are we replacing all of that,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
which is in black, with the red, and that would not be,
No,
I think it's in
it's
addition to.
an addition, it's an addition to, it's an addition to what is already in there. It's not replacing the whole thing.
okay. Well, if that's the case, then again, since we set fees in other parts of this and so forth, I would say that, we already get called the paint police by some folks. And it seems to me that a $5,000 fine is a bit high,
I don't agree.
okay?
My thinking being that this says that they may be fined, not more than 5,000.
It's just putting a little,
It puts a little bit of teeth in it, it doesn't mean that they're gonna be. Quite frankly, if you get a large enough project, you may pay the 5,000 and say that's cheaper than doing it the right way,
Right.
that'd be my concern.
Well, the restoration part is the
Exactly.
part
That's where the
I
teeth
think is
is.
the muscle in this anyway.
I agree also, again, this saying that it may be fine, to me, it just puts a little bit of teeth in there, but
again, it's already in our ordinance, you know.
based on the national ordinance.
And we had
Our local
asked,
historic
last
district
time,
But
but
that was adopted from somewhere, right?
You're right.
right.
Public Act 169.
Are there other ordinances, building codes, et cetera, in the city which have similar fines?
We don't have the building code anymore.
Right.
We don't.
I'm trying, most of our codes, I'd say the maximum fine is $500. Now, that doesn't mean the judge can't impose something out here, but if we use the municipal civil infraction, most of them go up to $500.
And when you look at a building code, as you mentioned, by rights, what will happen is the building inspector will stamp a red tag on the wall and will say this is uninhabitable until you fix it. And then it is what it is, and that's kind of what the second part of that is. But
And also, having said what I just said too, in addition to the fine, the judge can order the situation to be remedied, for example, and those costs are on top of, the 500.
Well, under the current ordinance, but I'm not sure under this change that that's still there. That's my question.
Are you talking about the second part?
Yes, which is sentence 2 of section 20.
Yes.
But the red replaces what's above it, right? This is the way this is presented to us.
Well,
Here.
yeah, what I was reading into that, and I guess we need to clarify this then with the attorney. My understanding was that the first part or the second part was there. I'm looking at this as,
Yes.
yeah, that this is what it should be, or this is what it states in the model ordinance, this is all we have. So we actually have the second part, we don't have the first part.
So,
That was my understanding in reading.
so
that.
you're saying we don't have a $5,000?
Correct, correct. And that's why I'm suggesting that we add that. So, to match the model
May I
ordinance.
see your copy? I don't.
This?
Yes.
That was my understanding, so I guess we need to clarify that with the attorney under violation payment of costs, that it has those, that it
So
should
you're
have
saying
both
we're
parts.
adding a $5,000 fine that we have not had?
Correct, there's
Then-
nothing in there that says that they may be fined not more than $5,000. But that,
My recollection was when we talked about this to some depth previously, was that our conclusion was that we felt we should simply update ours to the Public Act.
right,
That's what I
the
was-
model
Exactly
ordinance.
what it- to the model ordinance.
That's all I'm recommending, I'm not just
Okay.
pulling this out of nowhere. This is, follows Public Act 169,
Okay,
and it follows what's in the model ordinance. And for some reason, when our ordinance was established, we did not have that addressed in our ordinance, and it was probably because the model ordinance was not done yet. It was not done until after we had our ordinance done. So what we are trying to do here is update our ordinance to
Sure.
follow the model ordinance so that we're in compliance. So that's all,
You just think that dollar amount's too steep?
I think the dollar amount is too much.
but the state is the one that came up with that through
What, that
Yeah.
may be.
Public Act 169, so.
I don't know, I don't think it is too steep, I think it's the last resort. It's punitive for a reason.
I mean, I'd be happy to, I can ask the attorney, I can indicate that there was a discussion on this matter, and based on his experience, they work for a lot of other communities, you know, what, you know, does he have a recommendation or suggestion?
Well, we're still missing the point. We're not really talking about getting into how we're gonna find people. We're not getting into all of that at this point. Matter of fact, that's kind of what started this whole conversation.
Oh, I understand
You
what
know,
you're saying.
our conversation was just to try to get our ordinance in compliance with the
Right.
model ordinance that's recommended by the state of Michigan. And it also follows Public Act 169. We're just trying to get there first. And then we were gonna start talking about fines and violations and start, you know, really defining how we wanted to especially address our process of that, which is, you know, how many letters do people get, and then at what point do you start finding them? But all this does is just address that they may not be fined more than 5,000. That's part one. The other part of this violation of payment of costs was they may have to undo and redo and et cetera, and restore it back to the way it was, that
But
they
the-
could also.
But the way this is presented here too, we get into the, you know, definition, person, individual, partnership, firm, corporation, organization. We've had a number of items come to us, particularly those from the Housing Commission, where the applicant to us is some other entity. It shouldn't, I wanna hear from the attorney, the opinion on that. I believe every applicant to us should be the property owner, since that's what our jurisdiction is. Now, they may have a contractor speak to us or provide data, that's fine, but every applicant, I believe, is the property owner. Individual, partnership, firm, corporation, organization, et cetera.
Well, the fine would only
Would it-
apply
would
to
you-
the
I would
owner.
agree with you, because that's where the fine would go back if
Yeah,
it was
the fine would go to
incorrect.
the owner.
And it'd always go back to the owner.
Which is, if you noticed in the facade thing, that a tenant can apply. Which I thought was interesting.
But it requires, just as a point of information, it does require the property owner to sign off.
I saw that. Right.
Right.
But it's the same question again,
Right.
and I would like to hear the attorney's input on that from our perspective.
Yeah, I think it should be the property owner personally. I mean, I can see where an applicant wouldn't necessarily have to be the property owner per se, but somewhere along the line, the property owner's gotta say, I agree.
Right,
And, you know,
But as far as even like the downtown that we're talking about, I could definitely see a tenant requesting improvements because it's the facade of the building that they're leasing. Granted, it would have to tie back into their lease and it would still have to be approved by the owner, but I could still see them being the impetus
Right.
for the improvement.
Sure, absolutely, a new business coming, absolutely. Yeah, and I didn't object to that,
Right.
because it says it has to have the proper
Right.
approval.
Right.
But it came back, it was the same thing again as we were talking about in the definition here, about individual partnership firm. And I'm not sure, Madam Chair, that this change has got all that in it.
I'm not following you 100% on this, but this is what the model ordinance states, and that's all I was recommending, is that we add that one paragraph with the same verbiage. So, a person, individual, partnership, firm, corporation, organization, etc.
Right,
And it should be the same for
right.
both of those sections.
So, and that's, if the attorney is fine that that is the wording, that's fine with me. Then my only question is the level of the fine.
Yeah, but no more than $5,000.
I understand.
Yeah. But
Are there other towns, do you know, that have adopted this ordinance that have different levels of fines?
That I don't know.
there are.
I mean, I
And
know
I
they've
sent
adopted
those
the
out to
ordinance,
you.
but I don't know if they've modified the fines.
Yeah. What they do though is they have this in their ordinance, not more than $5,000, but then a lot of them will have lower amounts that they will fine people along the way. So if they have to continue to make repeated trips out to see the building or the house, and they'll fine them for that. You know, anytime you have staff time, if they have to hire an attorney to write a letter, then there'll be a fee for that. We were just starting to get into that a little bit before, but decided that we should address this first, because we were worried that we couldn't refer to something like this in a letter. If you remember, that's kind of what got it started, is we wanted to be able to refer in our threatening letter that, you know, if you don't comply or if you don't do this, then you could be subject up to $5,000 fine and restore the building the way it was, or whatever the issue was with it. So, but we can't say that if it's not in our ordinance, see? So that's kind of why we got started with all this to begin
We
with.
can change the amount of the fine later if that, to debate that later.
The finer points
Right.
up to,
Mhm.
Okay.
and, you know, whether or not we actually even implement it or not is another story.
If you have a thing, what other towns have done with different amounts, I'd like to see that.
Up to, not, most, I don't know a town that has, everyone that has the model ordinance has the exact same verbiage as this. But their fines that has adopted the model ordinance, the fines up to that amount is what can be varied based on the situation and based on how many times they go out there and those types of expenses.
Do you know places that have that we can look at?
Yeah, and I sent them out to us earlier, but Holland and Grand Rapids, all that was like probably 9 months ago.
But what you're
But-
saying though, is that they still say not more than 5,000,
Correct.
and then they
That's
put a
what it-
schedule of how those fees would add up to that, is that what you're
Correct.
saying?
They still have this in there, but they have other fines that would lead up to this, that they might charge along the way depending on what they've had to
It
do.
has taken us 6 months to do this, why don't we do it all at one time? Let's put that fee schedule in with it.
Well, but that's a different part of that, that's a procedure. This is not a procedure, this is stating in our ordinance, this is the maximum we're gonna do. I don't think we can blend procedure with ordinance.
Yeah, the city has another ordinance dealing with, like a fine schedule.
Right.
And so it would have to, ultimately it would have to go, to well, any ordinance change
Has to go to
ultimately
the
has to go to
council.
them, but, yeah, let me, let me get a hold of, I'll get a hold of my co-mayor, the city attorney, and what I'm hearing you is, what we'd like to do is upgrade our ordinance to the model ordinance,
Correct.
pretty much as is.
That's what we voted on before.
Yeah,
And-
it just.
And then, okay, we'll, that obviously hasn't been conveyed to me,
Oh,
but
yeah.
we'll take care of that. And we'll get the new ordinance amendments in shape, ready for get a review, and then we'll send them on to council to get approved.
Yeah, it should be a fairly straightforward.
Yeah, it won't be a difficult issue.
That's why I guess I'm not sure why we, you know, the other suggestion that I had made that I caught that was pretty glaring difference was under permit applications, in the event of conflict between the standards of the historic district ordinance and the city building or zoning codes, the most stringent regulations apply.
Pretty standard language.
Yeah, well, it's not in the model ordinance. That line is not in the model ordinance, that you would just, you know, choose the most stringent regulations. And who makes that determination, and how do you make it? And again, it's just another line that was in there that we still have in our ordinance that is not in the model ordinance.
Check it out if you suggest.
Well, if you're following the model ordinance, again, you know, I think we have to,
Right.
Be consistent.
yeah, I mean,
But you've
either we are or
indicated
we
you want
aren't.
to
If
follow
we're
the
gonna-
model ordinance, that's what we
Yeah.
follow.
Well, that's what I thought we had voted on, I guess, some of these points, on this one, I would question, I think that, conflict between historic ordinance and building code, if building code's more stringent, I think it's gonna apply regardless.
Well,
I do too.
I think it has to, I think we have to apply to the building code, period. They're supposed to be separate, really. But that's why I think this is a confusing line.
It's
They
a
have to apply to
common
the
line
building code.
in ordinances, and maybe that's why it's there. It's very
Yeah.
common. You find it in a lot of ordinances where there's a thought process that, well, you've got this code, and you've got this code and that code. Invariably, somewhere along the lines, you're probably gonna have some conflict. And so to avoid the confusion, so to speak, fine, we'll make the most stringent apply. No question. That's why you see that kind of language. But if the model ordinance doesn't have it, you know,
I think they just
we
don't.
can take it out. Yeah.
Many legal contracts have the severability in it too, so that the rest of it still stands if something is found not
Right. I don't see it as an
Legal.
issue. We'll take care of it.
Okay, I think it would be helpful if the attorney would review.
Yeah,
And
again, if you wanna follow the model
stylize
ordinance,
it too.
what we're gonna do is tell the attorney, you know, these are the changes that we wanna make, and we'll have him actually draft the ordinance that will be presented ultimately to city council that will incorporate those changes that basically will reflect the model ordinance.
Now, when he does this, and I guess this is a question, and maybe this is what Brian was trying to do, and this may be where it got confusing. Would he have, how would he make the changes? Would he just say, this is the new model ordinance that the city of Cadillac's going to adopt? Or,
Could, or most likely, well, normally what would happen is we're gonna amend the existing ordinance with the following changes. And those following changes, essentially, once made, would reflect the model ordinance, as opposed to
Okay.
throwing out an ordinance
okay,
and reinstituting a brand-new ordinance. It's much easier just to amend,
okay.
generally speaking. Not hard
The
to do
other
at all.
thing we had talked about, because this had gone back some time to some other discussions, is doing some sort of a public notice or a press release or something, possibly a legal notice, alerting people that this is coming.
Doesn't this have to be,
We have to have a
Public?
public, oh yeah,
This has to
there'll
have
be,
a public
there'll be,
hearing.
in fact, there'll be one or two, at least one, possibly two notices in the Cadillac News, for example, alerting people. Also, you know, it'll be on various city sites and so forth, so, all right, they'll be, because there'll actually be a public hearing ultimately,
right,
where the public will get to come and say, you know, what's going on here? We like, we don't like, or maybe no one will show up.
Is timing of this such that we have another newsletter going out to all the people in the historic district?
We could.
I mean, I know it will take time, but that would certainly, to the most affected people,
Yeah. No,
be
it's-
appropriate if we
If
could
that's what you would
mention
like,
that.
Ed, we can do it.
Yeah, I think maybe prior to us sending it to city council adoption, we should do that. Make them aware of what we're doing and why we're doing it, why we're recommending it.
If it would be in the form of a newsletter, basically what we would do, because it hasn't gone to council, is essentially indicate, give a little bit of the history
Mhm.
and what you're going to be recommending and why.
Right,
And indicate that, you know, that this matter will be coming before the city council. May not know the exact date right then. But just letting people know that there'll be a newspaper, you know, there'll be public hearing notices published in the newspaper and on the city's website. So, yeah, we can do that.
I think that sounds good. That's a good idea.
Yeah, Mike, you can do that. Oh, thanks. That's a
Okay.
good idea. Newsletter.
So, do we have any other suggestions or thoughts on that issue, or do you think at this point we're just gonna put it in the
I think
attorney's
we're
hand
fine.
and have him make the
Yeah, I think we're going.
changes and we go from there? Anything else?
Makes sense to me.
Yep.
Okay, all right, and moving on to the next one, Cobbs and Mitchell Building, they have a new website?
Right, well, you, Ed had asked me at the last meeting about the price of the building,
Mhm.
and I said I would find out, which I did. But in the meantime, you know, I met with Mr. Meskin and so forth, and he's put together a new website that has all that information on there. So basically all I'm doing is just directing you to the website. There's information on the building, there's the sale price of the building and so forth, so. He has done something, you know, he's moved forward to some degree. Just wanted to alert you to the fact that he's done this.
Yeah, that's good. That'll be helpful. Okay, and we have no other tabled items? No other informational items? Is
Just
there-
just one, excuse
Oh,
me.
yes, sorry.
When I got this after we put these together, but this is and these come out annually, this is the new resource directory for the Historic Resource Council, and so I got all of you a copy.
Yeah,
And,
this is Michigan Historic Resource.
and I have a few extra copies, and like I was telling Nan, we try to make things like this available if somebody from the public is interested, a contractor or whatever. And so it's your copy, so it's an informational item.
Thank you for
Thank you.
bringing this to us. This is helpful. Also, Jerry and I were talking a little bit earlier about that at the museum, this is something I just wanted to mention for everybody too, the Historical Society, we are working on a research library there right now, where we are organizing all of our research materials and resources, our books, files, news articles, maps, photos, and getting them in order so that people can go to the museum now and actually research their house, their building, special events that have happened in the past, people, that type of thing. So we're pretty excited about it. We've been working on this for about 2 or 3 months. We meet every Tuesday morning at 9:30 for 2 hours, so anybody who wants to come and help can help. It's painstaking. There's 4 of us, Top Shogren and Kathy Takama from the library, and one of her assistants is helping. And we have another volunteer, Western Michigan University student, who's majoring in history. So, and we're also going to be putting some information about historic preservation on our website, at the Historical Society. And I was gonna also duplicate it for Jerry and see if we could also put it on the city website. Just helpful information if you wanna preserve your building and how to do that. So, keep you
We
guys
should also
informed.
note that the courthouse anniversary tour will be held on July 27th.
Yes. Great suggestion. Does anybody have anything else? Okay, no public comments because no one's here. Jerry, did you want to introduce Mike?
This is Mike Coy. Mike is not replacing Brian, but Mike is the new community development analyst, and Mike will be working with the community development department on a variety of issues. such as working on the newsletter for the Courthouse Hill Historic District Commission. So if I'm not around, or even if I am around, feel free to call Mike, talk to Mike, let Mike know who you are and so forth, and he'll do likewise. And you'll probably see him once in a while, so hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have anything else? Just have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? Thanks, everybody.
Second.